Hello everyone, welcome to our first lesson of IGCSE Biology course, which will be Chapter 1, Characteristics and Classification of Living Organism. In this video today, we will cover specific topics 1.1 and 1.2. So starting with 1.1, 1.1 is Characteristics of Living Organisms. So characteristics of living organism is the basis of all biology. So any living organism is characterized by these 7 characteristics, which is movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, excretion, nutrition, and reproduction. So to give you a general tip, it is always a good idea to remember definitions by the syllabus because it has a very high chance of including all the marks that the question requires you to answer. So by taking out these definitions, we'll first start with movement, which is an action by an organism or part of an organism causing a change of position or place. The important part here is change of position or place. And an example would be you just moving your arm. That is a movement. And respiration is a bit different to what we normally think about respiration, which is breathing. Here, respiration is more about cellular respiration, which are chemical reactions in cells that break down nutrient molecules and release energy for metabolism. And sensitivity. Sensitivity is ability to detect or sense stimuli in the internal external environment and to make appropriate responses. So, for example, sensitivity could be you touching a very hot object and you quickly taking out your arm. That could be a sensitivity. So the definition of sensitivity could be broken down to ability to detect or sense stimuli and detecting internal or external environment, and final third point would be making appropriate response. So this definition could be about 2 to 3 marks. And growth. Growth is a permanent increase in size and dry mass by an increase in cell number or cell size or both. So just if you water a plant and a plant grows, that is an example of growth. And the important part here is a permanent increase in cell number and cell size, which is done by cell division, which we will cover that later, but just remember these definitions. Reproduction, the process that makes more of the same kind of organism. Excretion, removal of waste products of metabolism, toxic materials, and substances in excess of requirements. So excretion, you have to remember all these 3 components, which we'll cover later. But for the definition, yeah. And nutrition is finally taking in of materials for energy, growth, and development. Now, a good way to remember all these 7 characteristics is there is a good acronym, Mrs. Gren. So, M for movement, R for respiration, S for sensitivity, G for growth, R for reproduction again, E for excretion, and N for nutrition. So we covered 1.1, and we'll move on to 1.2, which is classification. So we first need to understand the definition of species. So the definition of species in IGCSE level are organisms that can reproduce to produce fertile offspring. What fertile means is that offspring can breed with another offspring to produce even new generation. So, for example, horse and donkeys are different species. Therefore, even though they produce offspring, which is the mule is sterile, right? So it's infertile. So they do not belong to the same definition of species. So we covered definition of species, and one keynote is that even though the species name are same, if their genus are different, they're not in the same species. Genus and species name must both match for organisms to be same species. So for example, Penis glabra and Ilex glabra are different species even though they have the same species name because they have different genus names. So these 2-part naming system is called binomial system. So it's created by Swedish scientist Carl Linnaeus, and it is an internationally agreed naming system for all organisms. So binomial system have these 2 parts, where first part is the genus and the latter is the species of an organism. So binomial names are always italicized, and the first word of genus is capitalized. So there could be a question asking, describe how binomial nomenclature works, and you can write they are italicized. The first part is genus, and the first letter of genus is capitalized. Sorry, I put the word there. Yeah, you can even give an example like Homo sapiens, which is human. So there are different classes, there are different levels of classification. So starting from more general and big one to specific small one, the largest classification level is kingdom. There's even one more domain, which is more larger than kingdom, but in IGCSE level, you just have to know kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So for example, when we are looking at humans, humans are in kingdom Animalia because we're animals, and Chordata because we have chords, and Mammalia because we're mammals. And inside Mammalia, more specifically, we're primates. And in family Hominidae, and genus Homo, and finally species Sapiens. So this is the order of classification, and organisms are classified by features they share. So, and a good mnemonic to memorize this order of classification is King Philip came over for good soup. So king for kingdom, Philip for phylum, came for class, over for order, for family, good for genus, and soup for species. So as you see, phylum Chordata is inside the kingdom Animalia, and genus Homo is inside family Hominidae. So the size of classification level increases upwards. Each group contains the group below, yeah. So the aim of classification system is to reflect evolutionary relationships of organisms. So in the past, classification was traditionally based on morphology and anatomy, which basically means appearance and outward features. But now, classification is based on sequences of bases and DNA and of amino acid and proteins. So similarity in DNA sequence means closer evolutionary relationship and sharing of recent ancestor. So as you see here, species 1 and species 2 have very small difference in the DNA base sequence, which is the N2 nucleotides. And you can see that these species are very close to each other, or they share a very recent ancestor. The why they changed the classification based on DNA and amino acid is because they're more accurate. So for example, when we based on morphology and anatomy, we only know the outward features, and we are not classifying based on internal characteristics like hormones, for example, we cannot see, but DNA covers all of that, so it's a more accurate mean. So this is 1.1 and 1.2 you have to know, and for the other topics we will cover in the later video. Thank you.